But you're watching The World with me, Indy Morkoc. Glad to have you back. Now let's take you back to one of the top stories, an ethics report by the House Ethics Committee with substantial evidence that Gaetz had paid for sex and drugs with an underage girl while in power. I mean, a 17-year-old girl. And to examine this further is U.S. spokesman for Republicans overseas, Morkoc. Errol, glad to have you join me. The report on Gaetz is out in the open by a usually secretive house that does not usually do this. What next? He's gone to court, I mean, Gaetz, but what next?
Well, I mean, we have a situation where if this had actually occurred in the way that this House report is being presented, certainly Matt Gaetz would be facing criminal prosecution. But the fact of the matter is the Justice Department has looked at the very same evidence, looked at all of it, and said there's no crime here. Matt Gaetz is not a popular man. He's not a popular man inside the Republican establishment, and he's not a popular man at all to the Democrats. So he's made enemies on both sides of the aisle, and that's what we're seeing here today.
No crime. Taking drugs is not a crime. Buying drugs and then having sex with an underage girl in Florida, that's an offense.
Yes, and if that actually occurred, how it's being said, then the Justice Department should have prosecuted him. But it doesn't appear that they were able to find him criminally connected to all of those. So the House Ethics Committee, as much as they might dislike Matt Gaetz, if their evidence is indeed as solid as it is, then I expect to see Matt Gaetz arrested. If Matt Gaetz is not arrested, it means that they don't actually have the evidence they're claiming they have, and it's just tangential. It's important, to understand this wasn't a court of law. This is a House Ethics Committee in a house that Matt Gaetz has very many enemies in. And I'm not privy to Matt Gaetz' life. I certainly don't take the word of Matt Gaetz or anybody directly defending themselves. But the fact of the matter is this did not go to court. This was not tried in a court of law. And until that happens, he's innocent.
And that's what I say. Might you be jumping the gun? Maybe later in the day, I mean, he just come out. I mean, it's not old news. Maybe he could go to, it could get there because, I mean, Florida says having sex with a 17-year-old girl is against the law. Buying drugs, paying for sex, paying for drugs is an offense against law. But he says this report came out on the eve of Christmas and not in court where he could defend himself. That's according to Gaetz. What do you make of that statement? And the fact, of course, that he put a post out there saying, how did he put it, that Trump sent him a message saying, great move. I think he said Trump sent him a note supporting him well, something like great, you're great or something like that. Errol.
Well, Matt Gaetz is right. They released this on Christmas Eve. Again, it's not a court of law. It's certainly scurrilous accusations, but if the courts have already looked at this information, there isn't going to be a Christmas night arrest of Matt Gaetz unless there's new evidence that hasn't been presented. The House has presented that information in their committee, and the police have looked at it and said there's no crime here. So I agree with Matt Gaetz. He's being castigated on Christmas Eve. It's a political attack, and President Trump is used to political attacks and lies about his character as well. And so I'm not surprised to see that he has an ally in President Trump. When somebody is being tried in the court of public opinion with no way to defend themselves, when they've defended themselves in court and been exonerated as far as the law can go, it becomes a problem of public witch hunt, and that's what Matt Gaetz believes he's being subjected to, and I believe the president thinks so as well.
That's what Gaetz believes, but for crying out too loud, Errol, there were evidences to show that he committed all the things he's being accused of. How does that reflect on how would Americans really view this? And let's talk about his political future going forward with this.
Yeah. I mean, Americans for the most part aren't too concerned about Matt Gaetz. he's not an incredibly important figure in U.S. politics. Yeah, he potentially could be, and that maybe speaks to more where his future goes. I mean, being a congressman is nice, but it's not exactly the upper echelon of U.S. power. He has a chance to potentially run for governor when DeSantis runs out. Potentially, he could go for Senate because Marco Rubio has stepped aside. Like again, certainly the allegations are very awful to read them, but the question still remains, why did the police say there's no evidence here? And then why did the Congress Ethics Committee say there's evidence? If there's evidence, he should be prosecuted. If he's not being prosecuted, it's fair to say that there's not enough evidence to find him guilty. So I think it certainly doesn't play well optically on Christmas Eve. But Matt Gaetz, he's a political operative and he's somebody who's been counted out many times before. So I would be surprised to see him disappear now, especially with the support of President Trump. And unless these allegations can be proved true in a court of law, until that happens, as an American, I treat every American citizen as innocent until proven guilty, and that's what Matt Gaetz is.
When the police says no wrongdoing, how does this rub off on you personally, Errol? I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about the evidences: 17-year-old girl paying for sex, his girlfriend he used as a front over time. How does this rub off on you, as a person with what police is saying?
Well, it certainly it doesn't surprise me that Matt Gaetz has been subject to probably one of the hardest attacks from Congress, being that he has almost no friends in Congress. If the accounts are true, if what he's done is true, then I condemn it fully and I condemn Matt Gaetz fully. But until you can find him guilty in a court of law and not just a trumped up fake tribunal in the Congress. I mean, they did the January 6th commission against President Trump, full of lies, burned all the evidence. So nobody trusts Congress. Congress has a 9% approval rating. So I need to see more evidence from a court of law.
I'm even surprised you're calling the Trump issue trumped up. All of us watched it, what happened or transpired during that period. But we're not talking about Trump. But I'm just surprised you're saying it's trumped up. And I'm also surprised you're calling this an
January
attack.
6th, absolutely. January 6th was completely trumped up. It was a complete travesty. Those were heroes. Those were American heroes who went to make their voice heard. And a very few people,
Errol, policemen were killed. Policemen
castigated the entire group. And so, of course, it was a sham trial, just like Matt Gaetz has been given a sham trial today.
Errol, policemen were killed. I mean, police people.
No policemen were killed. No, sir. Policemen were not killed. No. People had heart attacks. Nobody was attacked. That's complete fake news. The New York Times said somebody was beaten with a fire extinguisher. They had to retract that statement. Ashley Babbitt was executed. An American veteran was shot in the head by a Capitol police officer. That was who was killed that day. Police officers were not attacked by Trump supporters and were not killed. That's fake news. People had heart attacks. So every time there's a commotion scenario, if a police officer has a heart attack, that's terrible. But that certainly isn't what happened. And we did not kill people on January 6th. Our people were murdered. Our people were killed, shot dead in the Capitol. Cold-blooded murder. That's what happened.
Well, we'll leave it there, Errol. I don't know. We'll just leave it there. Thank you so much for being on the program, Errol Morkoc, there on Gaetz incidents. Gaetz.